Okay, so what are some other things that I can style here? Why don't I go ahead and style the background of my entire page? So I would do that by writing CSS for the body tag. I'm not going to write any CSS for the head. Anything that goes in the head, again, is outside of the content of the page. But if I want to set a parameter for the entire page itself, I can set it here under the body. So I go in my style tag here in the head of the document, and I'm going to write body, curly brackets. It'll automatically complete it for me. And now maybe I will choose a background image. Background image. And let me assign a value. And here it's going to ask me, well, what is the image? And the image that I want to set is, let's see if it lets me, URL. So if I want to set a background image to a JPEG that I have on my within my project folder, I will say background image, semicolon, URL, and then these ellipses. And within the ellipses, and it gives me a clue here, I'm going to find my images, and then I'll find my images of tulips. And now my images of tulips has popped up as the background image. So next I want to talk about aligning content, which is a little trickier than you might assume. And so the first thing I want to do, let's say I want to center all of this content. I want to center all of the text to be centered. So the way I would do that, I have these div tags here. So why don't I set it in the div, since that is those are the tags that hold the content. So I'm gonna, and in between body and H3 is where I'm gonna put my div element to set in the CSS, just so that I'm maintaining the same hierarchy that I have within my HTML. I'm having that here in my style tag. It's just a good organizational practice to write your styling this way. It doesn't matter necessarily where these elements are within your CSS document or within the style tags here, but I'm doing that because the body tag is the main tag, and then as a subtag is div, and then a subtag of div would be H3, so I'm just going to keep that kind of in order here. So what I'm going to do is go into my div, and I'm going to say text align and center. And what that does is that aligns all of my text to the center of my page. It actually sets it to the center of whatever the container tag is that's surrounding it. What you can see down here is there's a little bit of an issue with these lists. They don't work exactly centering all of the content within the lists. To be able to move these bullet points or these numbers over to be next to be justified, like the text is justified, you have to do something else, which is to set some styling for those list items. So for my let's say for my UL, because this is in order, my unordered list, I want to have list style position to be inside, right? That pops that to the inside of this position, of the styling position, and then I would just copy and paste that here. Okay, so now those things are more or less aligned to the center of these bullet points are actually the thing that are centered here now, and now you have your list items there. And they kind of work a little bit differently, right? Or let's see what happens if I go down to my list item here and I type in one item. Okay, it pops it over a little bit. So let me go back up here, and this works really well. This looks correct to me because I haven't set the width of any of these elements either, so they're just the entire width of my document, or the entire width of the body of the HTML. If I go to my div here and let's set, and we've done width as an HTML attribute, which you can set, but it's also a style attribute, so I just write width here in my CSS. And if I say the width I want for all my divs to be 500 pixels, right now it's not necessarily aligned. The text is still aligned within the div, but the div itself is not aligned within the whole body of the document. And so the way that you are going to need to, let's say I want I want this particular div to have this particular width, but I also want it to be centered in my page. The way I'm going to have to do that is by having a kind of container div surrounding my other divs. So I'm going to go back down into my HTML and write another div. And I'm going to cut and paste it here. Okay, but now I go into another problem, and just because I'm kind of really particular, I want to maintain the way this looks. I want to maintain my kind of visual hierarchy so that it's a little bit easier for me to find like where these opening and closing tags align. I'm just going to go ahead and. So now I have a little bit of an issue here, right? Because this is a div and it's embedded within a div, but how can I differentiate between the two divs so that I'm able to style one of them with particular attributes but not the other? And the way I do this, instead of embedding it within this div section of my CSS, I'm going to give these divs something called a class, because I want them to be dividing sections, but I want them to be differentiated. So I want to give my container a class, and I'm going to have to give it a class attribute. What a class is a kind of keyword that I can then reference in my CSS or reference in my JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and say class equals container. Okay. And now what I can do, and what I'll do here under this div, is give this a class as well. And you can set, I'm going to give this a class of content. I'm going to put a comma in between these attributes. And no, I'm not going to put a comma in between those attributes. I can assign the same class to different element tags. Okay, so I will assign this div class of content and this div also the class of content. Class equals and content. Okay, so let me save that. Now I can go up into my style tag in the head, and I can reference that class. And the way I do that is by putting a dot and then the name of the class, container. And see, I have two that it's telling me I have two classes here, container and content. So container, I want to have some particular information in order to make this div centered in my page. So the reason I can't set this, let me just back up for a second. I can't set what I need to set in the body, because the width of the body is going to depend on the width of the screen, and it's variable. So there's ways that you can do it, but it's more difficult to try to center all of your content elements within using styling of the body. What's easier is to do what I've done here, which is to create a section, dividing section, and then set the margins for that. Even though you know the div is referencing the body, for some reason I'm not able to do this right in the body. So I have to do it within this dividing section. So within this class called container. So what I'm going to do here is set the margin, and I'm going to say margin : 0 auto. And now all of the content is aligned within my page. And it's responsive in the way that if my browser window is going to be smaller, it will still maintain its justification to the center of the page. So now it's not just this particular, not just this div, it's going to be both of them, right? Because it's everything that's within the container. So now I have this class called content, and if I wanted to, I could say I actually want to have all of this style information rather than containing it here. And I want it to be assigned for both of these. I can cut this out of here, delete the style attribute, and then under content, I can paste those attributes.